company dedicated to enhancing leaders' ability to harness and optimize trust as a strategic business asset. And today I am beyond thrilled to welcome someone I've known and admired for nearly 15 years. This is Molly Painter. Many of you know who was joining in. Molly's just a force in many aspects of life, and particularly in the pharma and the biotech industry. She's got a track record of really scaling companies, driving commercialization strategies, and leading high-performing teams, primarily in the rare disease space. Currently, as a VP of Sales and Strategic Accounts at Takeda, she's shaping the future of plasma-derived therapies. She's held many executive roles at companies where she's built organizations from the ground up. Beyond business, Molly really embodies trust in every aspect of her life, including being an advocate for her family. She works closely with her son's care team at school, building partnerships rooted in trust that ensure everyone, her son, his educators, and their family have what they need to succeed. She's a strategic thinker, a trusted partner, a trusted leader, and a champion of giving back, serving on boards like the Big Brothers and Big Sisters of Chicago, the Joffrey Women's Board. And I can't wait for us to dive into her insights on leadership, trust, and what it takes to build and sustain success. So welcome to the podcast, Molly.
Well, thanks for having me, and thanks for the kind words.
What a pleasure. I could have gone on and on for a long time. It was tough to choose just some small ones there but we'll allow you to share a little bit more about yourself and expand on some of those things as we dive in. So we define trust as willful vulnerability, motivated by positive expectations. So when we think about that definition, willful vulnerability, it's a choice and it's motivated by positive expectations. When you trust, do your feelings or your reason to drive? Which one drives your decision? Feelings or reason?
I think it's feelings. I think if you've known me long enough, I extend trust from the get-go. I make the assumption that 80% of the time, if you extend trust, you make yourself vulnerable, you're authentic, that it will play out in the positive aspect on the other end. Whereas I know, as I work with colleagues and different people, that some people you really need to earn their trust. And for me, it's as a human, I trust you. I trust that you're going to, do the right thing. I trust that you're going to come from the right position, and that you're leading from the heart. And so that's kind of the approach that I take. But I think it's something that's just innate in who I am and how I was raised and just how I was brought up as a person. And I have a lot of rationale as to why I extend trust, because I had a wonderful family that gave me every reason to trust every single day, because they always delivered and did what they said they were going to do, and they did it with positive intent.
Yeah, it's certainly true. Our family shapes a bit of how we look at trust. Absolutely.
Yeah, that's interesting. Yeah, you say you're highly trusting, more generally, naturally. And as you extend trust to people easily, think about, do you also extend trust easily to other entities like companies? So non-humans or government or your car or a higher power?
Yeah, I trust that it's all going to work out. Like, at the end of the day, there may be bumps, there may be challenges, there's always going to be obstacles. But I do believe those obstacles make us better, and they were intended to be there for some reason. So I trust that at the end of the day, it's all going to work out. And I can have several examples of that where, I was leading the US for a startup that I built. We had a leadership change. We had a drug that did not get across the line with the FDA, had to do a lot of work on the back end after that happened. And it all did work out. The drug ended up getting approved after we set it up for success with another organization. All the people that were impacted ended up getting even better jobs because of the experience that they had at that particular startup. so one could look back on it and say, oh, I shouldn't have trusted, you know, our clinical development team to make this happen. However, at the end of the day, it worked out for everybody, especially the patient community, which is, where my heart really lies.
Oh, that's interesting. Yeah, that speaks to generalized trust. It really is part of who you are. I mean, some of that comes from your genetics. We aren't exactly sure about how that forms quite yet, but or how much of that's attributable to that. But also, like you said, your upbringing. You had lots in your formative years. You had lots of opportunities to observe and to accept trust and to give trust, and it sounds like it worked out a lot of the time.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I always like to say, look, my life has not been easy at all. When I go back and do my leadership journey, I kind of reflect and I'm like, whoa, I've been through a lot. However, it's always ended up, from my perspective and in my frontal cortex, of being a positive, pot of gold at the end of the rainbow.
Such a great way to think about. And at this point in your career, I think you are able to reflect back and sort of see that pattern that you've had. We think about certainty is only in decisions in hindsight, right? And so in times of uncertainty, the leader has to have more trust. And so how would you describe, your comfort level with uncertainty, and particularly right now in our environment feels very uncertain. How much uncertainty are you comfortable with when you're making important decisions, leadership decisions?
Yeah, I kind of work on the old adage of, you've got 80% of the information, you can make a call, right? And you can make a decision, and teams tend to like that and respect that, because you can move things forward versus remain stagnant. And that's how I believe organizations do end up moving forward. If you get into the analysis paralysis for too long, that's where the swirl happens. You actually lose trust, and you need to be the one to kind of lead from the front and ensure those decisions are made. I'm very comfortable in making decisions in uncertain times, and doing it based off of what I know. I mean, you can only make the decision off of what you currently know, and you can't, in my opinion, one cannot be completely skeptical about what scenarios may play out in the future, because there's several permutations of every scenario of what could potentially happen. So it's almost like the power of now. We're in the moment. This is what we know now. So this is how we'll move forward based on what we know now. We may learn as we go. Things shift, things change. And so trust that you're able to pivot. I trust I'm able to pivot and change with new information. That's helpful.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah. Sure. Yeah, absolutely. So think about leadership style, what you lean into the most, like autocratic, probably not that. Yeah. Transactional, probably not that. More bureaucratic or laissez-faire, transformative, situational, authentic. I heard that word. Adaptive, democratic, servant leadership. Those are all different, common styles. And there's mixtures of them. What do you lean into the most? What comes more natural to you? What do you enjoy the most? Who are you at your most authentic?
Yeah. So isn't the Daniel Goleman article, that's the leadership that gets results, right? Mm-hmm. And explains all the different types of leaders, of which I think this was probably published. This is aging me here, but
early 90s,
20 years ago. Anyway, but nonetheless, the one that I lean into from that particular article is the authoritative style, which is in essence, in the way I've interpreted it over the years, is the ability to set a vision. Here's where we want to go. And then empowering your team to get there, and making sure they have all the tools and the resources, and trusting that they will deliver and they're empowered to do their work. So that's how I approach it. Are there certain situations, of course, where you have to flex a little bit and change, where you notice somebody's really struggling, and maybe you need to be a little more directive in those moments, and that's with all good intent. Or there's times where you need to, maybe back off a little bit and be a little more casual, and to let the individual kind of figure it out on their own. So it's situational for sure. But I would say the majority of the time I like to be in this authoritative place where I'm setting a vision and leading and getting the heck out of the way.
Yeah, that's really morphed in the literature. That's really morphed into more transformative leadership, where
Okay. Well,
you're setting them up for success. But it's not only about your your follower. So it's not servant leadership in the way. It's not just only pouring in them. We have a goal. We have a shared goal, and that's where we're going. And I'm taking you there. But you're going to do it when we get there.
Yeah, and I think there's also this point of like, and I'll care for you along the way, right? So you're not left out to dry by yourself. Like you don't want to insinuate that to a team. You want them to know you're there to help. You're there to make them not only better employees, but better people. And all those things are kind of included in that in my mind.
That's great.
Yeah, and having known Molly and worked alongside her for a lot of years, the idea of empowerment is something that rings front and center for me. You are authoritative in setting a vision and driving a team. People want to follow you by all means. But that trust aspect is the difference, because people trust that you're going to look out for them and you're going to make decisions that are beneficial, certainly on behalf of the business, but also on behalf of the people.
Yeah.
Mm.
And I think one thing that comes with that also is just honesty. And being honest with people about where they, particularly stand, or where you see where they stand on a particular project, in their career in general. And also letting people know how that can evolve and change, right? That isn't a point in time that's going to last forever. Like this stuff is temporary. And as long as you're having authentic conversations with individuals, then that helps the team dynamic also.
And on that note, I mean, you are a very trusting person. We've gone through just sort of your history and why some of that's happened. Curious if you've ever found skepticism or distrust to be helpful in a relationship, what that might look like.
Well, I've definitely been burned by my approach. I mean, but I can probably count on not even one hand how many times that's really happened. So I still like to operate in this world of extending trust, because you end up in a better situation building high performing teams. However, there's times that you extend trust and then you realize, maybe something political happened on the back end that you didn't anticipate, because you thought, the world was butterflies and rainbows and it was all going to be great. And then quickly wake up to the fact that, okay, not everybody approaches things the same way I do, or maybe they have a different intent and manage things differently. Now, is it always people driven? Sometimes not. When you extend trust, sometimes it's just situation driven, why things happen, maybe that you didn't intend. My husband always likes to say, happiness is expectations minus results. And sometimes my expectations are so high that can lead to some disappointment if you don't achieve the results that you liked. Sometimes you need to adjust your bar. Now, in business, that's different. I think in personal life, that's where you need to adjust your bar of what you expect from people. Because I think sometimes you're expecting individuals to be the way that you want them to be, right?
Yeah.
And they don't show up that way, and they'll never show up that way. And as soon as you can accept that, I think that leads to happiness, and that allows me to be a better leader at work, because you can manage through those relationships at work.
No, you're right. That's critical to be able to separate work expectations and the types of people and roles that we have in those environments from home life or from our community service. There are different domains of life. And so that I need to learn that every day as I move from one domain to another. As I think about trust, I need to adjust that. Do you ever distrust someone? I mean, you don't distrust very much, but do you ever distrust someone in one domain of life or one area or function or ability, um, and then concurrently trust them differently for something different? So they're
I
good at
would say
something,
that
but they're not as good at something else.
yeah, I would say where my distrust comes in is if I've seen someone not be able to get something done, like a
Mhm.
certain task or a certain project. And oftentimes then I self-reflect that maybe they were assigned to the wrong work or maybe don't have the right support. But then there's times, we talk about the skill and the will, right, portion of managing and leading, that there really isn't the will there to do it, or there really needs some skill development. So if I go ask, someone on my team to build me, a business development Excel model, and he's been a sales leader for 20 years, that shame on me. But at the same time, you sometimes ask people to do projects or to do things that you think within their wheelhouse and they don't get done. Now, the next time I go to ask somebody for that particular thing, I'm probably not leaning on that individual. I'm not trusting that they can get it done.
Mhm.
This sounds appropriate. And when you
Yeah.
have options, right? When you have options for, oh, I can delegate to someone else, well, that's amazing. In
Yeah.
some situations, we have options to push responsibilities to different places. And when we don't, then that becomes more difficult.
Yep.
Yeah, and I would imagine that just as part of the natural inclination of who you are as a leader, empowering people, pushing people to reach their potential, you're always going to try and stretch them a bit. And some people are willing and wanting to be stretched, and others aren't. So, that comes, I think, with the type of leader that you are and why people love to work for you. I think about what you did when you started up companies. There's so many people
Mhm.
lined up at the door who want to come work for Molly because
Mhm.
Molly does stretch and empower and allow you to be, unlock that potential.
Yeah, and I also think one topic we haven't landed on is just having a good time.
Mhm.
At work or whether you're volunteering or whatever you might be doing, I think there's this notion of being serious and delivering on results, but people want to come to work or they want to, especially in volunteer work, you need to make sure that the atmosphere is set up so that everybody feels that you're hugging them almost a little bit every day. And in addition, there can be some levity to what you do. That kind of comes into the trust circle for me, because now I can hold you accountable to something, and do it in a very kind way. A kind way and a way that is like, hey, look, I know we talked about this yesterday and I haven't seen it today. And I also know you were doing a few things at home. Like, what's going on? So you can kind of dig in a little bit better when there's this authentic notion that kind of comes back to, I don't even know if it's having fun. That's just maybe my personality. So just extending who you are probably is what it is.
Yeah. And all these aspects that you're talking about, these characteristics of, a leader that you are and who you aspire to be every day. I'm curious, is there a famous successful leader out there that you've met or that that you sort of model after or that you view as highly trustworthy?
Oh boy. Um, there's a lot of them. That's why I was like, I don't even know where to begin. So I have several mentors, throughout, I think, my career. Yak Leonardi, I think Peter Anastasio, who I think you also know, Amy, that I, have on speed dial for different things. John Arena, I know I always tap into for different questions. And these are people I can go to that even if I frame the question the wrong way or I say it the wrong way or I kind of botch it a little bit, they are know where I'm going, know where I'm getting at. They assume positive intent. And we can wrestle with the topic to get me into the right spot. I also, our new CEO of Takeda, Julie Kim, I've known for a long time. So she's just a great role model for somebody that I've seen um, practice resilience
Mm.
and continue to display grit and really model for women, what leadership can look like, and that it doesn't have to come in one form, and everybody can show up as who you are as a person. And that's the best thing for the organization. That's one thing Julie's really, really, really modeled.
That's remarkable for someone in her position to be able to model that and demonstrate that you show up with your strengths, and that makes us all better.
Yeah,
I
Takeda just recently had a women's leadership conference. I don't know, and she came and addressed the group, and that was the one kind of nugget takeaway that I had is we talk about women's leadership and authentic women's leadership, and as if all women need to listen to one woman. Now I think we have the liberty, and I think it's a gift of having multiple people to look up to from a women's leadership perspective. I mean, you heard me mention leaders that I trust, and 3 of them just off the shooting from the hip are men, right? But I didn't. That's who I had to tap into the first 20 years of my career. But that shifted.
Mm-hmm. I love hearing that.
Oh, yeah. Hey, let's talk about risk taking a little bit.
Mm.
So, are you naturally more of a risk taker or more risk averse, more cautious? And how does this show up differently in work versus family versus community?
Oh boy, my husband's like, I hope he doesn't listen to this. So I only say that because I'm quick to act, right? So I'm quick to order the wallpaper. Okay, this is this fits within the budget. We're gonna go. It's done. I'm quick to act, and so I think on that side of things, I'm more of a risk taker. And I would say in business, I'm quick to act, but I also include a lot of stakeholders to be sure that there's alignment on critical things before acting. So I don't know if you put that in the realm of risk taking, but I obviously went and worked for a startup and had to do an IPO. We had, when I started, less than $10 million. So I would say that might put me in the category of somewhat of a risk taker. But it also puts me in the category of a learner of what risks are too risky and what ones are right in my wheelhouse.
Yeah. And it could change in different domains for some people. Some people are more stably more risk takers or more cautious across the domains of work, family, community, and or maybe when it affects you versus when it could affect others, like your employees or your children. That can affect our risk taking.
Absolutely. When the stakes are high, you're going to act a little bit differently when you're in a more comfortable situation where you're like, what's the worst thing that could happen here?
And continuing on that thread, just in terms of trust, we like to say that trust is a strategic business asset. Would you agree with that statement?
Yeah, I definitely do. Because I think that puts us in the category of slowing down to speed up, which I'm kind of contradicting myself here because, I say I'm quick to act, but when it comes to people and making sure that there's trust built in forming high-performing teams, in my mind, it's mission critical to do this out of the gates. So before there's time for anybody to formulate in their brain that person X doesn't like me because they showed these 3 behaviors, you want to get in front of that so you know that person X is who they are as a human, and this is where they may be coming from because their psychological makeup is a little bit different than mine. And just because they're not behaving exactly like I'm behaving, that doesn't mean they're a bad person and have malintent. And I think the solve for that is to always bring your new teams together, to have hygiene around that and have conversations. And Amy, I know you've led a lot of those conversations where you're talking about more of who you are as a leader, who you are as a person, the things that really motivate you. And once you can really listen and hear all of that, it just creates, speed to action, because people are not getting mired down in, I'll call it maybe political aspects that really don't matter and quite frankly probably aren't even true. But you slowing down to speed up and really building that trust of a team. But then I think you need to continue on as the team changes, as the team builds or it morphs, because no team stays stagnant forever, and continuing to do that work.
Well, I've always been so impressed at the dedication and commitment you've had to any team that you've built. Immediately, that is one of the things you do. And, I think what I've seen in that decision that you've made is that trust does accelerate business, because oftentimes there'll be super smart people in the room, but nobody will listen because of maybe the way they come across or what have you. And what you do is really cut through that by allowing people to get to know each other first. And then people want to listen. And then
it seems super basic. But, I had a MBA that's rotating through, right? And I'm like, listen, most of this stuff, I'm going to tell you right now, isn't what you learned in business school. It's what you learned in kindergarten. I mean, it's like how you treat people, how you, extend, do, favors for people. I mean, I can remember a day, I was a brand leader, and the other brand leader, who's still a friend to this day, came into the office and was like, oh my God, I haven't done my development goals. They're due. And I was like, oh yeah, I have mine. And then I was like, take mine. Like, just take them and tweak them and then figure it out and turn them in on time, and like, we're done. I could have taken, I don't know why this example is coming to my mind, but I could have taken that. I could have been like, well, my goals will be in on time and you're just going to have to, suffer. Whereas, think of the relationship, today. How many ever years later, just based on the fact that I came through in the clutch on like a simple thing to help somebody out instead of kind of, watching them fail.
Yeah. And I see how, with AI and just the advancement of technology and all the information that's going to be available, what you do and what you bring to the table in terms of building trust, collectively harnessing the intelligence in the room in a way that, trust is the foundation. That's going to be the differentiator, because the amount of information everybody can get is becoming ubiquitous. It's all there, but how you operationalize it, how you allow people to have conversation, that's where you really excel with your superpower of trusting, empowering, but certainly setting a limit. You don't allow people to get away with anything and everything, but you certainly allow the flourishing of individuals.
Yeah, seems like a good recipe for building social capital. Like you said, you came through in the clutch. It may have been a small thing, but that will be remembered, and that will flow, and and it may end up being like you're not in control, but they could say something to someone else that matters for you down the line for getting something done and getting done at the right time. So there's
Absolutely.
dividends. Yeah.
Well, one of the questions that often comes up in working with, like we were just discussing with high performing teams, is that the trust in you as a leader is different from the trust in your organization. And so you are the face of the organization to many people. I'm curious how you look at that, how you describe that, and maybe help people build more trust within the organization, or maybe not. Maybe it's not appropriate.
Yeah, no. I think there's a phenotype, at different organizations that fits with what the organization has to offer that particular individual. And, right now at the organization that I'm in, the phenotype is, do you want stability? Do you want a long-term career? Do you want to contribute to a patient community that has high unmet need? and have a series of resources offered to you. And if that's what you want, then this is the career for you. Now, if you want to take a high risk and money is the ultimate thing for you, where risk reward, and that's your personality or the point in time in your career that you want that, then that's the job for you. So sometimes you really have to tell the story of the organization so people know what they're aligned to, but also can look internally to say, this is for me or this isn't for me. I mean, that's basically it. And then when you can get to that euthymia, I feel like that's where the magic happens, because people, if they appreciate and have gratitude towards their organization and the opportunities that it affords them, no matter what the organization is. It can be a startup, it could be a mid-cap, it could be a large organization, but that's where the magic happens.
Yeah, there's so much good there. Just in terms of, you don't get to have that conversation with people unless you've built the trust that you've built, because you care about your people. And so the conversation is able to be had. And then the second thing I love, and Tony, you chime in too, just in terms of, trust is a choice. And often I hear people say, well, I can't trust them because of X, Y, Z. But is there an opportunity to look at things differently? And I think what you just described is sort of, again, putting it back in their court to say, you can decide, you can choose. And once you choose, be grateful for what you are choosing and that path. So,
yeah. I mean, I think we do live in a free enterprise system. So there's choice. I mean, we recently just experienced a lot of turnover, anticipated turnover. And in doing that, you want to self-reflect, like, hey, what am I doing that, like, is there something better that, I personally can be doing as a leader to, retain individuals? And there's always something better you can do. But I do believe there's this notion of, time and place of what's right for the individual at that time. And sometimes people just, their phenotype is not placed correctly for what the organization has to offer. Like a large 200-year plus organization is not offering you the same thing as a startup that is just gotten funding and is going to launch one product. It's just not. But hey, if that makes people happy, that makes me happy, because I've done that too. I've been down that journey, right?
Yeah. So what about specific to your industry, your very specific rare disease pharmaceuticals? How have you seen trust play the biggest difference in your different relationships with different stakeholders? Because it could be with the customers, right? The patients, it could be with your employees, it could be with board, could be other organizations that you partner with or compete against.
Yeah, I can probably go on with that one for days, but I'll start with the advocacy groups that I've worked with through the years and the relationship there and building trust with them. And as a result of that, being able to, work with the patient communities in the best way possible. I don't do as much of that in this current role, but I have done a lot of that in the past. And having that experience, I think, or those relationships, and knowing where the patient is coming from or their families are coming from and all the pain points that they're suffering, can help you to be that much better of a leader, to try your best to solve some of those things for them and really help them along the way. So I can kind of dive into that one, but working in different global roles, I think building trust across the globe is not necessarily the easiest task, in studying different cultures and being able to kind of flex your personality. I've gotten the feedback sometimes that I come off as too American. I'm like, well, I'm American. I don't know what else to tell you. I'll try to, I guess I have a mix of heritage. We all do in the United States. But I do pride myself in building trust across cultures. In addition, trying to understand the culture, approach it the right way, um, make sure to formulate the relationship obviously first before getting into business. And I think that's boded well over time.
Yeah, I mean, it's a complex industry. Every industry has its complexities and different stakeholders, and then you in your role, you move from one group to another on a daily basis, I'm sure, and so you have to readjust, recalculate. How am I recalibrate? How am I to show up here for these particular people?
Yes.
Mm-hmm.
I had a boss one time that told me that, sometimes you're, part businesswoman, sometimes you're part actor. And I won't say I'm perfect at it. I'm not. But I will say it's something I continuously work on, is how to align to, how other people approach things, and how to align to different, company cultures the best way possible, to build trust, to then get things done.
Well, on that note of, building trust to get things done, one of the questions, we're kind of shifting here a little bit, but I want to ask this question about, how do you love your colleagues? And love is being deep and unselfish in your commitment to someone else, um,
Mhm.
putting your interests before theirs, before your own. So I'm just curious, how does that show up for you in terms of loving your colleagues? And it's not a term we often hear in business, in the business world, but I do think it exists, because I think there are people that do put others' needs before their own.
Yeah. I have an example. When I came back to this particular role, I had a business underneath me that was given to somebody else in order for that individual to develop. It was a smaller business. And, in hindsight, I could have really dug in and put my claws in and be like, I just got here. I was asked to run this business, but I also knew, this individual really wanted this to grow and to develop and to give them more scope. And in my mind, I'm like, this is the right thing to do. And so I think that's an example. I guess I've never thought about that as love. Like, I love my kids, but um, it definitely was an unselfish move. You know, I could have behaved very differently, but I really dug in, like, and thought about my brain. My brain power told me this is the right thing to do, but my heart also said that this is the right thing to do for the organization and for the individual.
And just maybe a follow-up question to that. Do you feel as though that sort of approach is used frequently or infrequently in the business world?
You know, I've seen it go both ways, of course, and I don't know if I can like add a frequency ratio to it per se. But what I can say is I would rather hedge on showing your colleagues love, and building rapport and respect than to acting the other way, because I've never seen that turn out well.
Hmm.
I mean, that then factors into your reputation, that then factors into how other people perceive you. And it's just not a good look.
Just from my own view of what I've seen, and you'll recall Stefan, years ago, used to say culture is love.
Yeah.
And I had a hard time getting my head wrapped around that, years and years ago. But the more I sit with it and the more I look around and hear stories like you just described, it really is that aspect of love, of, putting someone else's needs first. And, the bigger person can do that. And
Yeah. When you really show love, and this is probably will surprise a lot of people, or maybe it won't, is when you have to do a riff, when you have to do a restructuring,
mm,
which I've had to do several. throughout the years, maybe had to do is the wrong word. I did. And when you are talking to those individuals and how you handle um, the transition, with grace for each person, and how they should know that although this is happening, their contributions to the organization are valued. They're not forgotten. And that I tend to always offer myself up to the best that the lawyers will allow, um, a as a mentor, a guide, and somebody that can help them through what would is a tough time, right? And that is, I guess you could say that is love. I don't know if people
I
listening
would.
will agree with me, but
I
that's
would agree with you.
how I go about it.
Yeah, you're not in full control in that situation, and the lawyers are telling you these are your guardrails. But you want to care for them and show care for them. That's who you are, and so it's hard when you don't have, as a leader, the less control you have and the less information or accurate or timely information you have, the harder it becomes to give of yourself, or to have others' interests before your own.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Very true.
On a similar topic, we talk about love, but also joy can show up at work, right? God forbid that we have joy while we're at work. How do you find joy in your work, right? And we're defining joy as perhaps the elation of right relation or relationship. It's a consequence of the right fit at the right time, like where your identity and the experience you're having they
Yeah.
just fit perfectly.
Like your flow.
Mm-hmm.
When it's all well, I think my current boss, he does a lot of that, like to try to bring joy to all of us on our leadership team. And just last week, for instance, we started our meeting because there were, obviously some contentious things happening. Everybody's under a lot of pressure. We're baking our financial plan, and he had us go around and talk about what we were grateful for, and just gratitude. And so I think just that was a good practice that he displayed that really can bring joy to what you're doing, because if you really ground yourself in what you're grateful for, then everything else kind of gets a little easier.
It's a great example. It's interesting how we start meetings with joy or celebration, how that sets our brain differently to start and engage in a meeting.
Mm-hmm.
If we
I know I'm going to take a page from his playbook on that one and implement it with my team. So.
Excellent. I wonder if we can shift over. We've spent a lot of time talking about trust in business, and Molly, you've done such a great job of integrating a lot of family and community into this as well. But I wanted to transition and just talk specifically about family life, if you're okay with that.
Yeah, absolutely.
So you've touched on this, but let's just talk specifically about anything from your upbringing and specific people or situations that causes you to be highly trusting.
Yeah, I mean, my parents divorced when I was 5, and I think they were definitely ahead of their time and approached the situation with a lot of authenticity and a lot of collaboration. And of course, there were differences, but those were always set aside with the children in mind, myself, and I have 2 older brothers. So I think that set the stage for trust that they're going to do the right thing and collaborate in order to make sure we raise the best kids that we possibly can, that our vision is achieved, right? And so I think that started. And then, of course, the branches of the tree started to grow, and my mom remarried, my dad remarried, and then they married individuals that just added more and more to my life. So, granted, they weren't the main actor, but the supporting actor. And sometimes the supporting actor wins the Oscar, right? Even though the main actor is just as great. So I say that all to say is I have a lot of trust because the way that they handled their particular division, the way that they chose particular people that then were additive to our lives, the way that those individuals showed up for me. So all these different things that happen, which could be perceived as setbacks,
Mm.
I thought as a child were just additive and made me better and made me the person that I am today. So I don't see any setback as something that's negative. It just is what it is. It's a temporary setback that then can lead to something more positive. So I don't know if I summarized that well or not, but
That was beautiful. Absolutely beautiful. And
Yeah.
I mean, so much love in that, right? Your
yeah,
parents made a decision, but they also looked to the kids to see how do we make this the best decision for all of us. That stems from, and I love just your outlook on so many people have experienced divorce, and you can look at it very differently. And again, it comes back to that gratitude. What has it done for me positively, and how do I leverage that? And I,
hmm
I see that coming out in you in so many ways
yeah.
in your life today.
Yes. How do you think trust has made a difference in your different roles in your family? So as a spouse or as mother.
Yeah. And spouse, um, mom, stepmom, it's that's a different set of activities and skills in order to build trust. My I mean, I extend trust to obviously my husband fully. We kind of laugh, but I don't know that everybody in the world does that, right?
Mm.
And he obviously does the same for me, so it allows for both of us, I think, to flourish while we're raising children, right? Two different sets that that we blended together and been very intentional about in doing that in the most collaborative way possible. So um, that's played out obviously well. I've got to trust him with my children. He's got to trust me with his children, and that that's a great example of extending trust, especially bringing somebody else into the lives of kids.
Mm.
Absolutely. And in your bio, you talk a little bit about, working with your son and at his school and the care team that he has, and making sure that everyone gets what they need. How does trust function in that relationship for you?
Yeah, that's actually been beautiful throughout the years and learning, having a son with autism and disability and navigating many aspects of that. One of which is the IEP process, which many parents are probably familiar with, or the 50 was it 504? We have an IEP, not a 504. Um, but I always say in that situation, it's, hey, listen, to all the teams that I've been part of. Usually I'm the only parent, and there's usually like 10 administrators or 10 teachers in the room. I said, look, I'm always going to be tough on the problem and kind on the people. I mean, the last thing that you want is for any of these educators that are working with your child throughout the day to have some sort of like hatred towards you. And that would play out for your kid, right? But at the
Mhm.
same time, you need to achieve the objectives that are set out, that your child is getting the appropriate resources and they're also being implemented the right way at the school. So building that trust with those individuals allows for that open dialogue that isn't perceived as criticism. It's just open dialogue. Hey, did this happen today? I'm not, it's not a pejorative, right? It's seen as, oh, she's just curious. Did Gabe actually get to off the off the bus into the classroom? Because we know he has challenge and executive functioning.
Mhm.
So a lot of that is just that's just a little example, but I feel that once you can get that team functioning at a high level, then your child's in good hands.
Well, the other thing I think about with that example is you could have just said, "I'm going to trust the care team with Gabe, and they know everything they need to know. I'm going to trust that."
Yeah.
And maybe this is an intersection of love and trust, in that I do want to trust that, so I'm going to step in and be a part of that and be
Yeah.
committed to that. And so you're part of the solution, you're part of the problem. Whereas the other approach might be sort of the opportunity to say, well, I trusted the team. They're supposed to be the experts and they're not doing what they need to,
Yeah.
but not taking any time to be committed to how does this work and how can I be a part of this?
Yeah. So you go into the system, I think it's don't quote me on this, but like 2.5 or something. And that's when the IEP process starts, or maybe it's 3, I think. And I remember interviewing attorneys, to find the right one to represent my kid or my child, Gabriel, in the situation. And I remember the lady that was in charge of scheduling the IEPs, the kind of the from the district office, calling me and saying, "Oh, well, that means that we have to bring our district attorney also, like from." And I said, "Okay, all right, that sounds good." And it was like, "Whoa, I've never, what's gone wrong?" And I was like, "Nothing's gone wrong." I was like, "At all." I was like, "I just know, I know myself, and I
Mm.
know that I don't have my degree in educational law. So I just want to be sure, as I felt like a good mother, that my child's getting represented appropriately out of the gates." And
Mhm.
what that has done, it's built collaborative teams over the years. We've had effective IEP meetings. I haven't had any conflict really, because it's all the facts are on the table all the time, and we're all transparent with one another. So I think I've done a decent job of building trust with, even external parties that I have no control about how they're chosen and how they showed up that day and got to that particular place. Right.
I mean, that's amazing leadership to be able to do that without the control, right?
Hmm.
Mhm.
Definitely is leadership without authority on that one.
Yeah. The influence, I mean, again, I have to come back to what an amazing example that is for someone who's already someone who extends trust, and to know that it probably was perceived differently, that you're going to bring an attorney in, but to proceed forward because you had your son at the center of what was most important. And if in order for me to trust this system, I need to be a part of it and make sure he remains at the center of that.
Yeah.
That's a beautiful story.
Yeah. Because a lot of it is being part of a system. You're in a system,
Mhm, mhm.
and a system that doesn't have a real profit motive. So you have to be completely aware of that, and a system of which a lot of times the people working on the team want to do things that maybe the system doesn't allow, right? And so there's a lot of forces at play.
Mhm. Mhm.
Mhm. Yeah, different domains of life have their own complexities.
Yeah.
I a lot of times I think about, as I study organizations, I think about organizational sectors as separate types of domains, right? So, for-profit business versus nonprofit versus public sector. They all have very unique institutional situations and ways of showing up with trust or distrust that help you perform better. And so that's
Mhm.
every time I teach my students, every time you walk in through a door, you're entering a new sphere, a new domain of some sort, where people are in it, and they may have different motives and different things that just happen to them that you need to try to account for, and as you're gathering data for engaging with them and showing up in a way that's, I think, loving and
Mhm.
trusting appropriately. So we talk about optimizing trust. on trust is the difference versus maximizing it, because sometimes trust is not the answer, but it is the difference.
Yeah, that's fair.
Yeah. Let's talk a little bit about community engagement. That's another sphere of life, another domain that we could talk about. You have mentioned that you have been connected with Big Bros and Big Sisses for a long time. And so how has trust made a difference in your service with that particular nonprofit organization and the people in it?
Yeah, so it's been a long journey with Big Brothers Big Sisters. And it started in my early 20s when I became a mentor to Gabby. And I served in that capacity for, I don't know, it's probably close to a decade. Um, and I'm still in touch with her to this day. I mean, she's now grown in, I don't early 30s. So it's been a great relationship. But the real message on trust here is that the mentors, myself at the time, the ones that I'm working with today that are through the board of directors, they're put into a situation with individuals who have not had my experience growing up and have been with a lot of people that they shouldn't trust and have not behaved in the right way. So then garnering trust when somebody is gone through trauma, gone through and garnering trust with them when they don't trust humans in general is, I think, the most difficult task, and has to be one that is approached in a very methodical way, and one with a lot of love, and one with a lot of patience, and one in which it's not going to happen overnight, but to keep chipping away and to keep chipping away. And as a result of that, garnering that trust of that individual, now that's the real win. That's the real win. I mean, the work stuff we've talked about is, that's small potatoes compared to what it takes to build trust with a child that's gone through trauma. So that's a lot of the work that we do on the board too, is make sure that the staff, the volunteers, everybody knows and can train those that are getting into these mentor relationships, or really putting their heart out there to help another individual and dedicating their time, that they still are educated on this process of building trust, and they don't get discouraged by the process, because we want to keep them in the program. We want to keep them mentoring, and we want to keep them in it for the long haul, because that's what we know really shows results.
It's about expectations. So trust, in the fuller definition of trust, it's about expectations being met. So positive expectations being met. And so that's in training, I think, in any sector, training your employees, your volunteers, your board, for what to expect. You're giving them a leg up. They have to choose. They have to choose to live within to trust you as you're training them, to expect what you say they should expect. And but then when they engage in that big difference between trusting and untrusting, distrusting, then in that relationship, then they'll understand, there's a big gap there. But then a win could be this big, right? In that direction, because it's about the long journey, about the long relationship.
Well, there's examples of many examples within the organization. Obviously, they're bountiful, but you really have to you can't be late. Yeah, there's things that you've got to just make sure you deliver upon, so that then the individual knows, okay, not everybody doesn't show up for me, or not everybody is going to be an hour late because I'm not important. It's like all these things as a mentor you have to deliver upon in order to build that that relationships, and some of them are small things that we might overlook in other situations. But knowing what the child has gone through to the best of your ability, because a lot of it's protected, I think is helpful in knowing how to kind of tweak your behaviors in order to get the most out of the relationship.
Well, those last two examples really underscored for me and as a reminder of how important setting expectations is at the beginning. So whether it was with your school care team for Gabe, or it's in this environment of working with children who have trauma in their history, and building trust looks different, and really setting expectations in terms of what needs to be done. Just a reminder, and underscores the importance of that, and how many times we miss it. We sort of jump in, and this idea of trust is the difference. We might just trust or assume that everything is going to go perfectly, and that isn't necessarily the best way to use trust.
Mm-hmm.
Trusting is taking time to slow down, as you said, and set expectations, get to know who's at the table and how we leverage. So
Absolutely.
thank you for sharing those. You've been so generous with your time. I do want to sort of wrap us up here. We have a couple of questions just to conclude. And the first one just is, what dividends do you see trust playing between your work, your family, and your community life? I mean, what's the payback to you?
I don't have to stress out all the time. I mean, I'm not stressed about it. It's like, let it go. It's like, my favorite Mel Robbins, like the let them theory. I'm like, I'm going to trust that this is going to work itself out. And that at the end of the day, my goals, aspirations, and my happiness in life they're going to be achieved. Right. So that's what it gives me. It gives me like a peace of mind. I mean, I don't know. I obviously work with people in every capacity that we've mentioned today that don't necessarily extend trust. I need to adjust myself for those individuals. But I also kind of feel like, oh God, that would be like hard to live. Like they have to, everybody's got to earn your trust. I mean, geez, I think that's a lot of people. So it gives me joy. I mean, it keeps me happy approaching life that way. And sure, the times that I get burned, like, or have been burned, does that feel great? No. And do I look back and think, Molly, if you would have just like, why did you do that? But in hindsight, I'm glad I did it, because that's the behavior that keeps me happy, and I think is who my authentic self is. So I get to be me.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, there's joy in that. It seems like you have a good sense of responsibility. For yourself, you have a good sense of what your responsibility is in your different relationships, and then you attempt to proactively show up. And then because you do that, then you can feel good about it and pretty much carefree because you did your part, even if
Yeah, I like
something
to
didn't turn
always
out
be
well.
able to. I think that's great. I think that's true. I think that it's also a little bit of a fairy tale that you can show up perfectly for every person all the time. I'm an imperfect human. I do know that. So I acknowledge that to people when, I've been imperfect. And, but I've got a lot of people in my stratosphere of who I work with, from family and to be able to show up as your best self, or show up all the time the way you want to. It's a bit of a fairy tale. I always strive to do that. But there's only so many hours in the day.
Yeah.
So that's
In
one of
the
the
tired
reasons-
hours. I don't know who I'm showing up as in the tired hours, but like, it's that's what my kids get, the tired one.
Yeah.
Not the one that just did yoga. They don't get the 7 a.m. Molly. They get the, 6:30 p.m. just got off an airplane Molly.
Right. Man. Yeah. So what do you think? Last question. What's one takeaway that leaders can get from your trust journey? What is the one nugget?
I think that I said, lead and get the heck out of the way is
Mm.
And it's been said, and it's been said time and time again. And I think that oftentimes too many humans strive for control over excellence. And so that is why they have a hard time just leading and getting out of the way.
Beautiful words. Thank you.
Hope it was profound.
It's simple and authentic.
Mhm.
So that is profound.
Yeah.
Excellent.
Yeah. So what do we do with all this? What do we do with these nuggets? What do we do with these this information? What can we do? How can we, Amy, how can we apply this, right, in our lives and our leadership opportunities? We'll have to watch and rewatch this this podcast to glean those things. There's a lot that was said here that we and our audience can take away from this. That's excellent.
Well, that's humbling to know, because I just, it's just me. But at the same time, I hope it aligns. There's some things that align with your research and the work that you're doing. And I think it's commendable that, you both are, have put so much investment, time, energy, your career, quite frankly, into studying this, because it's allowed for folks like myself to even kind of really amp up my game even more and think about how to leverage some things that I'm strong at.
Yes, I think you provide an excellent case study in your different domains of life. And thank you for being so authentically open in sharing these experiences that you've had and your insights with us and with our audience. We appreciate that so much.
Yeah, and I would just thank you, Molly. I think, you're an inspiration to many people. And it's because you are using your natural strengths in a way to get things accomplished, and accomplished in a very fun and productive way, not only at work, but at home and in your community as well. So I love that you were able to share all those examples and so quickly, come to mind with specifics in terms of how trust plays a role in each of those. And it was even more impressive to see, how you really almost didn't trust a system, but put things in place to allow you to trust that system and took control of that. So as Anthony mentioned, there's so much here, so many nuggets. And so I know our audience will benefit. I benefited today, and we just appreciate your time and willingness to hop on with us to further along a topic that's important to many.
Yes. Well, the pleasure's mine, and you guys have an awesome day.
Yeah, thank you so much. We want to invite our audience to subscribe, do all those things, watch our other videos, our other podcasts that we have, and comment, right? Provide us comments, provide us feedback. We want you to engage with our conversations that we have on trust, on distrust, on confidence, on risk, lots of different associated ideas and concepts that relate to trust and how trust is the difference.